So this dashboard is the Swimlane Editor. This is where all the magic happens. So the report that we are on is here, and there's just a simple dropdown that you click, and you can see all of the reports that you have access to in the system. So we'll stay on this first one as a demo. And this report is, we like to think of it as like a PowerPoint presentation. This is the whole deck. So you can create reports from this editor that are multiple slides or multiple panels, as we refer to them. So this panel dropdown is how you pick those. So we have 2 panels in this report, panel 1, panel 2, and this is like 2 different slides on a deck. So you're getting 2 reports, 2 outputs in one report.
Yeah, do you want to switch between panel 1 and panel 2 just to show how the editor reacts? Yeah, different config for panel 2. And if we go back to panel 1 and then maybe to jump to the punchline, why don't we view the report and then connect those dots between the panels so people understand how they relate. And then if you could slide down to page 2, please. This is panel 1, and then this is panel 2. And since you're on panel 1 right now, if we scroll back up to panel 1 and then close the report, maybe you can just connect the dots between Swimlane A being in blue there. If you want to collapse Swimlane A and then bring up or collapse Swimlane B, and see and scroll to the top again. So that everything we just showed in that report is contained in the instructions that you're playing around with now.
Yeah, I love that the color coding matches the editor. It's so handy to see. You can have the report run and have that in a second window, and it's really easy to connect the dots between, okay, this is the yellow swim lane, these 3 things are here. Yep, those all look right on the report.
Why don't we go to panel 2, if you don't mind, because it's panel 1 I've used in all the demo stuff, and we can go to town and do whatever you like on panel 2.
So each of these lines are separate tasks, and you can see the project and task that they come from. And if you click anywhere that you have this link looking blue highlighted text, this little pop-up is where you edit the task information. You can change the project that it's coming from, the task, its icon, label, color, and font color. So what I like to do when I'm editing these is open in a second window the task list or the project. So if I click on the project name, it just automatically opens in another window. And then
you'll have to hit show more at the bottom. Sorry, I've got a lot of other add-up stuff in between you and the data. And then tasks is right up there.
So in a typical environment, tasks will be at the top, and the task list will open up right away in another window, and it's super handy. But this is what it'll look like. So I can see all of the tasks with their numbers in this project. And if I'm working in, so I've got to translate this Latin here, and we're in RMAP. So this is the first task, right? 211 lines up to here. And we've got 211, 23. So we don't have 214 in this list if I close this pop-up. So let's say we wanted to add 214 to the swim lane, which would be right here. This task is number 22. So the way I like to do that is looking through the list, you're comfortable in that environment. I can come in right under 213 and click my little add button, this little arrow. And if I open up the task dropdown, just type in 22 and it'll come in there as the first option. And there's 214, blah, blah, blah. And that task will be brought in. So if I just click add, it will pull the task in, and that's all it takes. So if you want this to have an icon, you can click in here. It'll bring the editor window back up and click into the icon dropdown. Maybe we want, seems like Australia, and give it a label. The bar color we want the same. It matches everything else, and the font color is black. And now it has this little green dot next to it showing that something changed, something was added. So it's really handy as you're scrolling through the list. This does not autosave, so you have to save as you're going. There are a few clicks that will save things. I can close out of one of the windows, or the edit panels window that saves, right? But if I just close this browser, this would go away. So if you see the green dots, click the save button. And I find it better to save more often as you're going. It takes a second to reload. You get that nice little gray window, but now the save and cancel button are grayed out. There's no green dots, so this change was made, this task was added. And now if I hit view report, it will load the whole report, both of those panels we looked at earlier. Or if I click preview panel, it's a little bit quicker. It just loads this one panel that we're working in, so I can visually see that I added task 214, and I should get the little Australia flag somewhere in the purple swim lane right there.
There you go. And how come it's on that? How come it's on that same row?
Yeah, so I was going to look at. So it's kind of cluttered on here. It seems a little close together. I may want to break that out. So I've got Canada on top, and then Australia, and then the others below. So if I close this preview, we don't have any separators in this swim lane, but we do down here. So these red lines break out each of the tasks that are in their little section into different sections. We call them section breaks or line breaks. So if I come up here and click this little icon with the red line and arrow above the task I just added, it's now going to be broken onto its own line. And then say I want everything else below broken out. Now this will be on its own line. These things will be together, and these things will be together. This report also has some really smart logic built into it that does its best to prevent collisions and does a really good job of that. So collisions of text or icons, bars, things that will be not legible if they run that way. So it might break things out onto its own lines as it needs to, or onto separate lines as it needs to, but adding these red section breaks forces it. So they're in their own.
Yeah, could you maybe, it looks like I left the data with labels on most of these. Maybe why don't you take out the labels on 1 and 2 there, just wipe them out to illustrate how the task name would then show up on the report if the label wasn't otherwise overriding them. And I'll point out, we haven't actually saved yet. You're just playing around right now, so you can preview it until you get what you want and then hit save if you chose to do it that way. But you said you save more often, hey?
I do. If I'm making a change that I'm not sure about or just want to test something, I won't. So we'll say, we made these changes, all these rows were affected. And I want to see what that looks like. Maybe I don't like those changes. You can still hit preview, which is another really great feature that you don't see in a lot of things like this, that as you're working, you can preview it, save it when you want to, and check how it looks. So I like how this looks. Everything is readable, is legible.
Yeah, I've noticed that the item 1 and item 2 are a little longer than they used to be now too.
Yeah. You get the whole task name instead of just the label put in.
Oh, and the green check mark, I should mention, also means that those tasks are complete.
Yeah, and we can see that in the task list too, if I switch back over.
And although you're flipping between this view and back to the Swimlane editor, I think you were saying you normally would just put it on 2 monitors, right? Where you've got more room. Yeah,
when I have 2 monitors, I would prefer to have it split out. It also works well to have this as kind of a narrow window at the right side and then have the editor, depending on how big the screen is. I don't necessarily need to have this open. I know I'm just adding 25 here. So I'm just doing. But if I'm building something from scratch and working from a project to the editor, I like having both open.
Would you mind sharing in your words rather than mine for a change, how cool it is to be able to set up a report like this that then responds to real-time data changes or timeline recalcs?
Yeah, it's amazing. There's no other tool that does that I know of. And you can get the native Gantt in Workfront and have no flexibility. You can't set icons, you can't change colors, you can't pick and choose which things are on there. That's the basic functionality, and it's not a usable output. To be able to create something that's visually pleasing and functioning really quickly from live data immediately is really powerful.
Yeah, nice, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess that because we don't see any label on that row, something didn't work quite the way we expected on 213 maybe. Oh yeah, the font
is come out with the task name. We have the purple background, right?
If you change the font to black, I was playing around when I had a shorter label. It was on top of the bar, so I made it white so it was more legible. That's why we have those 3 options, which we could increase. Like those are all very easily customizable. And there's our label, and there's no check mark at the front now anymore because it's not 100% complete. So I couldn't have queued that mistake up better. Thank you.
Perfect.
You showed how to do colors and icons and labels. You've added a task. How about let's do the moving, the dragging and dropping part.
Sure. So this was something that we worked on for a while in development, a way to move tasks around. So once you build a report, it's quick and functional to be able to change the layout and the position of tasks, both within a swim lane and across swim lanes. And you can do that 2 ways. There's an icon over here that's little green arrows. And if you click that, it's now highlighted green, and I can move that task somewhere else. So I'll just click back on it and not move it yet. Or you can drag and drop, which is really cool.
Yeah, why don't we don't have to save this change, but why don't we move Canada and Australia both down beside, I think that's India.
So then I can grab our flag here, and you'll notice this has a section break above and below it. So watch what happens when you drag it down to another swim lane. It's smart enough to know this was supposed to be a section, this was supposed to be a section. It drops the extra section break, and you get all those together down here.
Right. I wonder if we preview this now, whether those 3 will be close enough that it'll automatically sort one, like break it out onto its new row. In other words, you don't have to insert those red lines. It's smart enough to know, well, looks like there's enough room for each of them there.
Yep.
But what if we remove the Australia prefix?
Yeah, then it'll probably break out.
This is way better than scripted. Thank you.
So if we remove that, this is blank, so it'll pull in this big long task name instead of
should do it.
that should create a conflict. So let's hit preview. Let's just take a second to appreciate 7 seconds, and you've got a beautiful report, a whole slide built, customized.
Yeah.
Everything you want, colored, looks good.
And it pushed India down to the next
India
line automatically because it knew there wasn't enough room. If it wrote that label of Australia out, it would have obliterated and made it difficult to read the India flag and prefix. Perfect. Okay, let's move from that and talk about, I think we've hit all the highlights that I wanted to mention on, other than downloading to PDF, which if you just scroll up a bit, that's as easy as hitting that little arrow. We needn't, but that's how you can download it and then, forward it to someone if you wish. Why don't we save your changes here? I think I like what you've done so far. And now we'll talk about, if you would please, the report admin options.
Yeah, so there's a report and output that was too much information to fit onto a page and needed to be on one slide for a deck. And the PM that was presenting the deck hasn't been trained in the system as much, wasn't as familiar with making edits. And so one of her direct reports was going on vacation and needed to, or was the one that built the report. And so she needed him to come back on and edit the tasks around so that everything fit onto a page, squish some lines together. And instead of doing that, we've now, Doug and Ryan have now built in this really cool feature to be able to dynamically shift the size of a report so that it can fit onto a page or expand out to be larger text. And so there's all of these different attributes that you can edit and change on the report. So you can you start with just the format. So this is what standard users would see is this format column, and it gives you a quick option of +3 to -3 report size. And it, in a sense, zooms the report in and out, but does it in an intelligent way that handles font size and relationships between tasks and icons even, right? Those, the position, the height, and how they fit onto a bar so that everything stays in line in the way you would expect it to. There's a lot that goes into resizing a report and being able to have these very simple 7 options that alter the report size is really cool. So we were running it on default on 0, but just to show as a quick example, I'll switch to -3 so we have a bit of a dramatic change and just hit preview. Since it only takes 7 seconds to run, I think it's worth doing. So we saw the report before was almost an entire page. The Swimlanes were fairly large. There was some space between the tasks. And if we had a lot more information, that would have or could have split onto a second page. But you can shrink that way down so you can fit a ton of data onto one page or one slide for a deck for an output. And I think you guys have done a really great job of making this as small as we can go while it's still all legible and usable. You can still see what the icons are. You can still match up durations to the timeline. The text is all still there and legible. Everything fits in, and this is a really powerful feature that I don't know of any other tool that does it as cleanly, as nicely as this. Anything that you're using to build reports, you'd have to go in and move the bars around or shrink things down or select everything, change the font size, something like that. This is just, you've got this format drop down and can quickly change what it looks like. And I'll just put that, I'll open up here. Default, I think for me, works 90% of the time. Most of the reports that we're creating, we kind of know what the size should be, how many things we can fit onto a page, or if we care if it goes on to a second. And because this report lets you generate multiple panels or multiple slides, I can make a 10-slide deck that runs with one click of a button, and I've already got those reports broken out so that they fit onto a page. But when stuff is added and you need it to still fit the same way that it did, being able to change that and run smaller reports or larger reports is really great. And it would have saved in that instance that happened a couple weeks ago. It would be very easy for that PM. Although they're not a whiz at coming in and adding tasks and changing things super quickly on here, they can change an option in a dropdown and make the report just a hair smaller, go to -1, -2, see what works, and you could have a nice looking slide.
Yeah. Are most people gunning for a single page? Is that kind of the usual?
We work out of slide decks a lot, especially in presentations to exec level or management, and having everything on whatever the ratio of PowerPoint slide is kind of the ticket. So for our company, for our way of presenting and sharing data, it matters a lot.
So maybe why don't we go back to 0 for format, and this is out of curiosity. I don't know if I'll include it in the video, but when you're setting up multiple panels, can you just speak to what's the use cases that you're doing? Is it like different departments showing different stuff, or is it panel 1 is like an overview and then you zoom in on a subset of data or a different time frame? Oh, maybe we should pop the edit panel and edit Swimlanes too. We haven't done that.
This report, the Swimlane report, is nice because you can break out swim lanes and have some information for different functions, but that may get too large. So one term we use is stage gates. I think that's a fairly common term across industries, that you've got a large long-term project, in our case 10, 15 plus year projects. We break them out into stages. And so this report is nice. If you're looking at one program, one asset, you can time out each stage and have different colored blocks, so that that'll still roll down the page like a Gantt, but you'll have those sections, those colors nice, and call out each stage. And then within that, each stage may have 10 functions working in them, some different ones in the earlier and some different in the later. I can have a report that shows for each specific function, either across stages or for one stage across functions. And those different visuals are valuable to different groups. Like the function leader might want to see just the information for their function. So they'll have the overall timeline broken out and then a specific one for their function. And then we'll do that for each function, because the deck might be going to 5 different function leaders. So you know, that's 6 slides right there. And if we're doing this in PowerPoint or in some other tool to create that, it's 6 slides you're manually updating, not using live Workfront data, where the source of truth of where the data is held is Workfront. And we want the data to be pulled directly from that live real time to create these outputs so that we have consistency across the board. These are also the same time frame. You can also show different time frames. So we could have one that's a 10-year output, really high level, and then go year by year, maybe.
Yeah, if you hit the drop down on the reports, please, Justin, about halfway down, 008 is a 5-year, just up a couple from there. Yeah, let's try that one. That will illustrate a longer time frame if you view it. And then let's shorten the duration of the panel to illustrate how that works, and then maybe change the color of the swim lane to show how that works, and maybe flip on the dates. So there's a 5-year window of some high level items. So if you could edit the panel, please, let's shorten that. Yeah, and there's our pink line showing today's date for the record.
Yeah, we haven't had that on before either, but
yeah,
this is really handy with the green checks to see when things are completed. Because if you have the pink line somewhere in the report, ideally everything before it should be green with a check mark. Yep. And this is something that doesn't have an icon. It's a task that's sitting here. This is late. We know that it's not complete and it's before the pink line.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you can do on here while we have it open is copy panels, which is really handy if you're doing kind of like the examples I was explaining before, where you're taking an overview that has all the information and then breaking it out into more specific. You can copy that panel and then delete out the few tasks you don't need and add in the few more specifics. And you've got the same color scheme, the same setup, the same date range, whatever you need to quickly add panels. You can also, on that note, copy reports or whole swim lanes to create other versions of reports.
Okay, so you just switched down to the one that you shortened?
Yeah.
There you go.
Should we try shortening or changing it again just to make sure?
Yeah, good idea, Ryan. Maybe set that top one back to 23. And then it's what's the one?
Not saved. I'll leave that and hit preview.
Okay.
And it should be back in 23.
You switched to that top panel?
I was on that top panel. Yes.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's now, So to recap, what threw us all off there for a moment is we were adjusting one of the panels, but then previewing a different one. Would you mind clicking show dates there as well, Justin? Just it's kind of obvious what it'll do, but might as well take a peek at it. And do you usually run with dates shown, or does it depend on the audience?
It also, depends on the audience. I would say I more often run without it nowadays, but there are some specific people that always want it, or some specific reports that we always want dates.
Yeah. And Ryan did a bunch of great work so that the scaling that you see, the year, the quarter, and the month will right size automatically and be very crisp and correct, depending on the time frame that you choose. If there's enough room to say Jan, Feb, Mar, then it does. If not, it gets down even tighter than that.
Nice.
So that's super handy, and again, something you otherwise would have to fuss in other tools just to get the right formatting going. Exactly. Okay.
And then we're going to look at the swim lanes. So this panel has 3 swim lanes. We'll call them gray, purple, and gold. And each of these have their own name and their own tasks associated to them and their own colors. And that is edited or modified in this edit swim lanes pop-up. These tags are just used on the back end. It's how the system ties tasks to the report. And those are just set automatically. This is handy for an admin if you need to go in and see where something came from, if you're troubleshooting or something like that. That's why it's there. But I can change the name of this to Swimlane 1. You'll see the tag kind of modifies and shortens to whatever fits, and change the color of that. So if I don't like gray, maybe I want this to be, we already used yellow and purple, so how about green? And I like this setup of the dark color, light color. so that the header, the left side of the report, is this darker color, and then you have a light version of that on the right, and it gives you a nice separation between them.
Yep.
So they're just some colors I picked in, but these are also fully customizable by an admin. It's just in a drop down, a custom field. You can add whatever colors you want, fit your company's color scheme or suggested colors for reports.
Okay.
And now you see this.
Yeah. Sorry, could you add one more swim lane just to show how that works? And then
Sure.
We'll drag a couple of these other items into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one I don't think we can or would want to change. That's just a gotcha, as to remember if you do change your tagging, that you'll need to save. That said, I was going to ask you earlier, do you change your tagging much, and do you even think about the tagging anymore?
Not once the swim lane's created.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I don't change the tag ever. That's just what the system sets. Might change the title to swim lane, which in turn affects the tag.
Yeah. Yeah.
But rarely. Normally, we'll know what the swim lanes are when we create the report, and
Right.
we'll set them then.
Well, on that note, and we're also running in the standalone mode where we can write filters that look through the entire Workfront environment. But you can, and maybe more often in your case, I think, use the Swimlane Editor beneath a portfolio, which would then automatically restrict to only those projects and tasks within the portfolio, or even faster down to a program level. Is that which of those three do you most often use?
I use portfolio almost exclusively. We don't have a huge need to run reports that contain data from multiple portfolios. If we did, this is where we go to the standalone, so you can access everything.
Yep.
And I find that the performance is fine at the portfolio level. I don't have any issues. If you had a really large portfolio, you may still get some slowdowns. If there's 100,000 tasks in a portfolio that the report's trying to look at, then it may make sense to look at a specific program just so that it's a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But we have a relatively large portfolio. I don't know what do you think's in our main portfolio, Doug?
It's good
15
size.
programs, a couple hundred projects, some of them with thousands of tasks.
Yeah.
And it loads that perfectly fine every time. And if I need something from another portfolio, I can come back out and add it really quick. But
right. And just to make it
more intuitive.
Yeah, just to make it clear, the drop down that you're clicking there, just in that project filter drop down, that's actually all of the project filters within Workfront that have been defined that this user has access to. So if you needed a special filter that got all of the purple tasks, whatever those are, you could create that, or purple projects, I should say. It would, you could create them independently within Workfront and then refresh the Swimlane Editor, and your user would then have access to the one that you just created. And if it's a good one, you can share it with your colleagues who also would be using the editor. If you could scroll up a smidge, I think I forgot to mention the legend at the top, which is dynamic, and depending on what you've picked and chosen and the time frame that you choose, will only show you what's somewhere on one of the segments within the panel, right? Because each panel would have its own legend.
Right. And we didn't really highlight either. Each panel can have its own date range. Maybe we mentioned that, and we showed that you can change the date range, but and really highlight running a whole report with multiple date ranges
Sure.
at the same time.
Yeah, you could do a 5-year, a 1 year, and then a Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4.
Yep.
And those could be each of the pages in your Swimlane report. I would have started by building the big one first, and then I would have copied it, changed the date range on the next one, and so forth. And minutes to build that? Where are you hoping to take this tech with your team, and how are we going to help people understand why this is a superior technology rather than exporting data and cobbling it together in something that requires a bunch of care and feeding?
First of all, it saves time. Secondly, it creates more accurate and consistent visuals for reports. And it's connected into the system that you're using where you store your data. So it just it makes sense. I can create an entire deck, pull in the tasks that you need for the reports for a project, and then it's built. And as the timeline changes in the project, as predecessors push things out, or you change dates, change percent completes, you just go back into this editor and hit view report, and you can very quickly generate a deck that looks the same as a weekly output or a monthly output, and get the same result every time very quickly. So that's one huge thing. It's direct from Workfront using the live accurate timeline data. So there's no option to change the bars, change the dates, and present conflicting information. That's one of our fears, definitely as admins and project program managers, is having two different teams or two different groups presenting the same information with conflicting dates, conflicting time. it's always an error. If you're looking at two different pages, two different decks, and you have the same task, and one says it's going to be done in March and the other says it's going to be done in June, someone's wrong. And it's, there's nothing more obvious than in reports. You need it to be the same. And so while that date might change or might have changed, always pulling it from the most accurate, most current, reliable source, Workfront, is the best way to ensure that you're presenting consistent information and not creating additional confusion, wasting time, which can easily happen if you're exporting to Excel or to whatever, and then you can go into and change the date, make an update there, and then not get the update back to Workfront. So this encourages PMs to use Workfront to maintain their projects and update their dates so that it's right in the report and right in the tool. I hope that more PMs will continue to use it across our organization. So we've got higher level program managers and then project managers at different functions and different levels. And I think they can all benefit from this tool and use it to create both high level and more specific Gantt function decks. It's really pleasing for me when I see decks coming from different groups, different departments that have the same look and feel, that use the same color schemes, that use the same icons. It's a messaging of continuity, one organization working together, creating the same outputs, working towards the same goals. And it makes sense for an executive level that might be looking at a report from 5 different functions to have them all use the same reporting tool, have the same look and feel, using the same icons. When I see this purple circle number 2, I know what that means on any report. And that's an icon that we use a lot, and it is meaningful. It has, it's not just a diamond or just a star in whatever color. I don't even need the legend to know what that means. It's always the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this tool has the capability to be able to be that answer where you can have consistent reports that work well at any different level.